Due to the length of the preceding program, we now join the regularly scheduled program already in progress.
My guest today is Natasha Akiwenzie, who is the representative of the Green Party here in Bruce Grey Owen Sound. Natasha, welcome. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, David. It's nice to be here.
Now, Natasha, tell us a little about yourself. From what I understand, this is your first time running for political office. Is that right?
It is. So, yes. So my name is Natasha Akiwenzie. I'm from Lac Seul First Nation, which is located north of Sioux Lookout. But I'm living at Nayachineming with my husband and 3 sons. And this is my first time stepping up to this kind of plate, but here I am.
Well, I happen to know personally, and from all of the candidates that I've interviewed and the people who have won elected office, it does take something special to step up. It's you got to be a little brave, you got to be a little out there, and you have to, be able to. And you speak representing your party. Now you're representing the Green Party.
Yes, I am.
What caused you to pick the Green Party and to offer yourself as a candidate for their in this riding?
Well, there was a couple of really good reasons. The first one is that they allow the candidates, to speak independently, to vote independently. So if the community, where Bruce would like to maybe not be part of a vote or have a different idea of how to do things, I'm allowed to bring that voice forward. I don't have to follow the rest of the party, which was really resonated with me. And also the environmental work. I'm a manager of a not-for-profit environmental group that we train youth in ecology and being Indigenous guides, climate change, public speaking, a whole bunch of other things. And climate doesn't seem to be talked about near as much. And living in this area, it's affected my family deeply with the fishing, with the whitefish disappearing, Lake Whitefish out of Georgian Bay. The numbers have been declining and declining quickly. So that was the 2 things that made me really think about joining the Green Party.
Yes, because in the Canadian political background, we have something called the whipped vote. And just so that listeners and our viewers understand that, it means that the party enforces discipline on the caucus. And if you see a vote, all the Liberals voted in favor, all the Conservatives voted against, or some coalition, it does mean that is a whipped vote, and MPs are required to follow the lead of the party, or they can lose their membership in caucus. But the Green Party is different. Apparently, you are allowed to bring forward. You are allowed to basically vote your conscience. Is that correct?
Yes, and that really, it feels good. You're able to vote with your heart and your conscience, and you don't have to, fall in line.
Yeah, and that's perfectly reasonable. And I do know there have been over the years certain issues which have been what they call a free vote, but the majority are whipped votes in the parliamentary system, except for Greens. So that's interesting. Now you spoke of the impact of climate change on your family and the decline of the whitefish. Is that one of your passions, the whole issue of climate change and where we are? Because you're right, it hasn't been an issue in this election at all.
Yes, so fish and the climate and the environment is something I take very personally. It's I think most people who lives on the shores of Lake Huron or any Great Lake notices that the decline of the lake coverage, lake ice coverage, and the impacts it's having is not just on humans, like as in many more snow days and less snowfall, or stronger winds, but it's also impacting ecosystems. And it's an ecosystem that's sometimes not understood as much as other ones because it's hard to see fish and how they live out their lives. We see how other creatures live out their lives, as in deer and bear and what have you, but it's hard to understand what's going on with the fish. But the one thing that we can all share in common, if we look out over the water, is the lack of ice. I don't like to think I'm that old, but I can remember when it was almost a guarantee that Georgian Bay would almost freeze over completely. I was raised in Penetang for quite a bit of my life before I moved to Owen Sound and met my husband. And we would see ice as far out as you could possibly see. Same thing when I first moved to Nea-Shiniming, Owen Sound area. You could see ice as far as you could imagine. And now I get really excited over seeing 6 inches of ice along the shoreline. And that's dramatically changed from what it used to be. I can remember listening to how the ice would break up, all the creaks and the groans and the snaps and the crackles as it would move out, and hearing it being dragged across the bottom of all the cobblestone. And I don't remember the last time I heard that. I know they said maybe 10 years ago, but it feels like a distant memory to me. So these things that are really important, I don't want to sound like, those stories that people kind of laugh about when they talk about the grandparents having to go over all these snowbanks and how deep the snowbanks were to get to school. I feel like I'm becoming one of those people talking about the ice coverage and the way that winters used to be.
With all respect, what you are becoming is an elder telling elder stories.
Fair enough, I guess. But at least if nothing else, I can be a storyteller.
Exactly. That's very true. I share those memories of 25 years ago when I moved here to Grey Bruce. There was a lot, the ice went out a lot further. That's, we don't get the frozen over that we used to get. And yes, and as this winter has shown us, the lack of ice and the changing, the cold air over the open water, and well, look what we got. Snow like you wouldn't believe.
And I'm pretty sure nobody likes the amount of shoveling we had to do and
That's
snow
right.
clearing. But I'm very sure that a lot of youth really enjoyed all of the snow days.
Yeah, I think they may have, but I think they got tired of it too.
Yes.
I did notice, in fact, I heard a gentleman speaking very recently. He's a maple syrup producer. And he was saying that this year, the devastation on the maple bushes was phenomenal, and that's another change. He's lived all his life here, and his sugar bush is over by the tank range, and he was saying that it's just the damage that this has caused is huge, and it'll be years before they recover. So we kind of he kind of put this down to changing climate, but is this where, and you mentioned the decline of the fishery, what other areas are of concern to you as a candidate, as someone who lives in this community?
Yeah, so I have a lot of friends who are farmers, dealing with drought or flooding. Farmers talking about how they can't get into the fields because they're too wet. And then weeks later, talking about getting into the fields and it's too dry. And it's that severe up and down, unpredictable weather and how it impacts their lives. And once upon a time, it used to be a bit more stable. It was a bit more predictable. And now every year they have no idea what they're looking at every single year. And that's hard on any family, any community, how to plan into the future when every year, every couple of months is dramatically different from the last. And that goes for so many different industries. And I can imagine how, and I know that stress of how to plan. How do you plan around this? How do you plan, your savings, and how do you plan on buying a house, and how do you plan on putting money away for your young people to go to school when you don't know if your crops are going to make it or if your job is going to be there.
Right. Now, the Green Party has historically taken on a lot of environmental causes, and if we're and has done actually quite well in this riding over the last 25 years, both provincially and respectably federally, although it's never elected candidate, but it has done well. And do you feel that there is that energy behind the Green Party and the potential for the Green Party vote this year, in this election?
There's always energy.
Mhm.
And I think there's always a positive energy because I think there's a growing movement of people who worry about future and future climates and ensuring that the environment, a good, strong environment, is here for many future generations. And I've been very fortunate this year to hike the San territory with our youth group, the Akiwenzie, from just north of Orangeville, so Hockley Valley, all the way up to Tobermory. And to see this beautiful land and to talk to people who talk about conservation and talking about protecting these wild places and providing habitat for creatures and encouraging people to reconnect with nature is growing, and it's appreciated a little bit more. I have gone hiking with people who have talked to me about lumber that's, how much do you think that tree is worth, as in board foot? I've never looked at a tree that way, so it's an interesting conversation because it's a different perspective. I see it as a home for so many creatures and providing oxygen and holding the soil in place. But it's an interesting perspective when you look at a tree from a different point of view. But I think the environmental movement is growing, and I think we're all beginning to appreciate green spaces around us and the important role that they play.
It's interesting you should say that because I don't think people realize that San, the traditional territory of San, the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, basically is not just this riding, but also Huron-Bruce,
Yes.
and edges into other electoral districts. And it's one of those things, all of a sudden you just connected a dot for me because I use or in my other life, my work life, the land acknowledgement from Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, and which caused me to go and look for okay, what is the territory of Saugeen? And it's large. It's large, but and so it's appropriate that you would want to be a part of the protection of this land because it's all shared. We're all here in the same place. We all occupy this space.
Yes. And we hope to have many, many more generations here and to appreciate that kind of beauty that I was very fortunate to see and share and look at from a totally different point of view, but sometimes with very sore feet or being soaking wet. But it was an experience that was unforgettable, and it helped me even now to appreciate what we have and how valuable it actually is.
Indeed, indeed, and I know that all you have to do is talk to someone who walks the Bruce Trail along the
Yes.
Niagara Escarpment, and they feel the very same way, that this is a wonderful resource that we need to be good stewards of.
Yes. And not just the Bruce Trail,
Mhm.
all of our wild areas, because they're working hard to protect us.
Mhm.
And it's not just, it's protecting our waterways and like the wetlands. I just went to a workshop listening about the wetlands and the important role that they play. And nature does such a wonderful job in such a gentle and caring way and has done it for thousands and thousands of years. So I don't know why we would need to change that.
Very true. Uh, my wife was speaking to an elder at the Muikwodong Center, and they were talking about the level of snow. My wife mentioned hey, we got a lot of snow this year, and the elder said, yes, but what I see is water in the creeks next spring and this summer.
Yes.
It's a
Yes.
totally different perspective. When you said it's not board feet was a different perspective. Well, I think that's a different perspective for all that snow we've had.
Yes.
It goes around in circles.
It does. And it was so nice to see this amount of snow. I'm not a big fan of shoveling, but I appreciate it because it goes into the groundwater. The trees, I know some trees in our back area, our backyard, have been in dry soil by beginning of July. And I don't think we're going to have that issue this year, hopefully, as long as the temperatures stay somewhat relative. And it was so nice to finally use snowshoes that we bought like 2 years ago to finally strap them on and not say, let's pretend there's snow. So it was a nice luxury to be able to go out and snowshoe and fall down in the snow and not get worried about getting hurt. Actually, be able to snowshoe along shorelines because, again, you have enough snow that's covering the rocks. And just the amount of beauty and all the tracks that we were able to see and things like that we don't normally can see because there's no snow.
What are some of the other policies of the Green Party around housing? What's your take on the housing situation we've got in this country?
Well, I have 3 sons who live at home and almost 30. One of my sons is actually turning 26 in a couple of days. And trying to talk to them even about renting a house or buying a house seems like something that's like way off in the future. It's not something that's really discussed because I don't know if I don't know if they think it's possible. So I understand how frustrating it is. And so I really think what we need to do is also invest in skilled trades, offering more skilled trades in high school and getting people out of high school with a really good trade to work with to start their savings up to start their young lives off so that they can have the opportunity to work towards home ownership, but then also to build affordable housing. I often drive by these new developments, these new subdivisions, or whatever you want to call them. And I wonder often, just the sheer size of them, is that affordable? And how many people actually live in that ginormous house or those places? And it worries me because it's so hard to have those dreams when groceries are so expensive, when everything is so costly right now. I can't imagine trying to figure out how to scrimp together a little bit just as a nest egg to be able to put towards a house. And it's really difficult. I can't even imagine. Well, I can, but it's challenging.
For sure. And we've all experienced phases of our lives, perhaps, where those have been realities, but it does seem to be a whole lot worse at the present time. What about tariffs? This has been called the tariff election, and obviously we have issues with there are issues with the U.S. government doing some things we can't figure out. But what is the Green Party's position on the tariffs and the relationship with the U.S.?
So I think we need to be able to become really self-sufficient. I think it's more than possible. I know it's going to take time, but sometimes having to do it because you kind of feel pushed into that situation is maybe a good thing. It's like doing dishes in the sink. You don't really want to do them until you can't get any more dishes to fit in a sink. So I think it's a good it's a good thing to become a bit more self-sufficient and taking a look at what other provinces or what other counties are doing and seeing how we can all work together to make something happen. And I think Canadians are really good team players with each other and communicate well. And I think, we have an amazing team. We just have to work together and come together and communicate and share our strengths and weaknesses and figure out a way of making things happen. Also, we have many other allies across the world that maybe we should be having more conversations with, which I know it's happening, but maybe, reaching out to them and inviting them to be around the dinner table and having those important conversations and trying to figure out how we can work around this. I don't think this is going to be a long term. I hope it's not going to be a long term issue, but it might be. But again, it's always good to open the doors to so many other opportunities and come up with a creative and a more gentle way of dealing with it than becoming confrontational. There's nothing is really solved when you draw a line in the sand, when there's an ultimatum made. It's, we got to keep those doors open and the communication lines going.
One of the things I have learned from my Indigenous friends is more words, less threats.
Yes. Nobody likes a bully. True. Really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we've got 2 ears and one mouth for a reason.
Exactly. I'd rather sit back and listen, and then share what I've heard, summarizing it. But I really do think we just need to sit back and listen and be willing to talk with other people when need be.
Do you see that as a role of the MP for here in Bruce Grey Owen Sound to listen?
I think it's really important. I think any MP or anybody in leadership needs to listen. They need to hear the people, spend the time with people, encourage people, be the biggest cheerleader in a room when it's their own people. I think, a leader rallies the team and they're all on the same floor and they're all doing the same thing together. And there's no hierarchy. It's just a team building exercise. And you move forward and get things done as a group. And everybody works with their own different strengths. Everybody brings different strengths to every single team. And I think we need that time and to listen to one another to find out what everybody's strength is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes it's the noisiest ones who get all the attention, but it's the people in the back row who maybe have some good ideas too.
Yes, it's often the people against the walls or in the corners or sitting quietly in the background, minding their own, because they're listening. They're listening and they're watching. And sometimes when you need to figure out what's going on in the room, you need to go to those people and ask them, what did they see? What did they experience? Or what did they hear? Because sometimes they can hear the conversations going on in the crowd that you may not have heard.
Very true. Very true. Well, let me ask you another question. It's a little more related to the sort of the community itself. There are several energy projects going on in Bruce Grey Owen Sound. Well, if we include Huron-Bruce, we've got the Bruce Power. But I'm wondering about your perspective, particularly on the pump storage project that is going on. It's a green initiative, but certainly it's proved to be controversial. It's on federal land. And do you have a particular perspective on that initiative?
I do. I don't support it. I just can't imagine replacing that amount of wild space with a giant block of cement and metal and steel. it's also the damage it can do to habitat, to something that I consider very precious to me, which is the lake whitefish, the habitat that it's going to disrupt by sucking up Georgian Bay water. It's going to suck up a lot of its food, a lot of its babies, etc. It's going to store the water where it's going to get nice and warm, and then it's going to be released. Whitefish is very susceptible, can be really affected by temperature of water. Their spawning is triggered by the temperature of the water. Their eggs hatch by temperature of the water. So by adding warm water to Georgian Bay, which is cold, it's going to affect their life cycle. So we're not helping them at all by doing this. And also just by building a giant cement thing, by destroying a lot of habitat for a lot of other species. It's just so that we have more energy. I think we should be teaching people how to conserve energy. Maybe green energy, as in houses being built with like solar panels or wind power or different options. But using more or is not maybe the best way. Is just because we have more, we shouldn't use more.
That's both a thoughtful and a helpful response, which I appreciate. It's not something that I have. I've heard a variety of opinions, but what you said in respect to the lake whitefish is something I had not been aware of. So thank you for that. It's helpful because this issue is not going to go away.
No.
It will not.
No.
Well, we've got about a minute left, and I just wanted, if you had any message you wanted to leave with the voters.
Yeah. So my message to the voters is, again, Greens vote independently. So what your concerns are, I can carry that message forward and I can have that vote or not that vote. I don't have to follow the party lines, which is so unique. And I really hope our environment is exactly what it is, if not better, when we leave this world.
Natasha Akiwenzie of the Green Party, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your thoughts. Best wishes in the election, and who knows, maybe we will talk after the 28th. Friends, I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking, and yes, we'll talk again.
Thank you.
This program is brought to you by Rogers Xfinity, connecting you to more of what you love. Visit Rogers.com for more details. This is Rogers TV.
For me, the end was just the beginning. I felt I must come. If I did not come at once, it would be too late. And these places that are watered with the best blood of Canada might only be names and memories. I see it in the soldiers, the grief I know so intimately. And I will not abandon these men to it. The isolation wears on me. Slowly, the silence takes over, as if my heart has given out of air. I cannot talk. I can only paint.
For more than 2 years, Mary Ryder Hamilton painted the battlefields of the First World War, creating an unforgettable visual record of service and sacrifices at immense personal cost.
RTV Sports Wrap every Wednesday as myself, Spencer Byers, and our esteemed panel talk about everything you need to know going on in football, basketball, baseball, hockey, and soccer as we joust about what's going on in sports, keeping you up to date on Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome to Politically Speaking Election Edition. I'm David Shearman. My guest today is Ann Gillies, and she is representing the United Party of Canada, and she is running for election in Bruce Grey Owen Sound. Ann, good to see you today.
Thank you for having me on.
Now, as we were discussing just before we started, you are either a bear for punishment or someone who, well, I won't go there, because this is your second election campaign in as many months.
Yeah, 2 months.
Yeah.
Well, bear for punishment, yeah, I think my husband might say that too. Or he actually says, and you're what does he call it? You don't give up. And I said, no. Oh, he said, you're like a dog with a bone. And I said, yes, it's called tenacious. Mm-hmm. Tenacious, because I have a real passion for truth and for justice. And, I'd like to say I got it from my parents, but I can't really say that. I mean, my dad certainly, but it's interesting. I could have never seen myself politically involved really up until about 2016, 17. And so it wasn't in my wheelhouse. I loved my career. I loved being a mom, first of all, and then being a trauma therapist and working with survivors of chronic sexual abuse. And then I started writing, and that kind of got me in trouble. It got me into the political sphere, and I realized pretty quickly that there's some dialogue that is not really open to dialogue. And that doesn't seem right to me. So anyways, that's kind of how it started. And then, I tried to run in 2019 for the Conservative Party and was disallowed largely because of what I had written. I had written a couple books by then. And to understand what I'm writing, I'm not writing my own thoughts. I'm writing from scientific research and background, and really looked into a lot of things. I have a PhD in philosophy of professional counseling, and so I really want to look at things intensely. And so I was disallowed from running, and that was a shock to me in many ways, because this was the party I had aligned with all my life, and I thought they would listen. And so that was kind of like, I was very naive. Can I say that? Very naive in that sense. And so I've learned a lot since 2019. I didn't really expect maybe to run again. I didn't know. And then I was asked to run in the provincial election for a very one-issue party. And because I have done years of research on this issue, it was a gender ideology issue. And so I said, well, it is in my wheelhouse and I will run. And I have to say, I loved it. I loved it because we put information into the hands of parents and families in this riding. And I had a lot of really, really good phone calls. I also had some people that were very hateful, and of course called me a bigot and called me a hater and all that kind of stuff. But I've already had that. And, they don't know me. They don't know my character. They don't know my love for children and family. So I just kind of let that wash off and go with what I know to be true.
Well, you chose a party, or were asked to run by a party that I've never heard of before. And that's why I had to do a little research. The United Party of Canada. Tell us a bit about that. I mean, right at this point, I think it's got something like 20 candidates across Canada, 10 of which are in Ontario.
Which is a surprise to the leader. Now, I met our leader, Grant Abraham, about 3 years ago. And actually, a wonderful Conservative member of Parliament who really has a very solid idea of values, introduced me to Grant and said, you really need to talk to Grant. And so I did. I talked to him, and I really liked him as a person. I liked his character, his manner, and he was going to run in Alberta for the Conservative Party, which he tried to do, and he also was disallowed for a different reason than mine. And so kind of watched that tracking, and then watched him begin to go through the process of developing and registering a new party. And I was watching kind of from the outside, because wasn't thinking about running again, although I appreciated what Grant was doing, because what this party is all about is bringing us back to the very foundations that our forefathers had built this country on. We must go back to those bedrock foundations and the fundamentals of faith, family, and freedom. We need to stay with the understanding of the nation that Canada was designed to become. And it was built on Judeo-Christian principles, which are inclusive of other religions. It's not about excluding other religions. It's just a basis, a foundation of our belief of how people should treat one another, and a belief in the supremacy of God and the rule of law. And when Grant began to talk about that, I'm thinking that's exactly, and it's resonating very deeply in this riding. I am having a lot of great conversations. And so that's kind of where I began to really consider, well, if there's another election, maybe I will run. And you can see my gray hair. I said this morning on radio, I don't need another job. I already write, and I love what I do. I'm still working pretty much full time. I've always worked, but at one thing or another, we have 6 children, so that was work. But I really, really liked the policies that he began to develop. And when you visit the website, you have to check the policies, because it's going back to our very, very roots. And you may well know this, that our roots include 25 Bible scriptures in center block and on the Peace and Victory Tower. And so I've been reading through those and going, wow, these are just basic fundamentals. And I think that Canadians are hungry for that. It's not about pushing a religion. It's not. It's about presenting principles, moral principles that really our country is founded on.
Your comment about going to the website for the party is certainly very trenchant. I did go and look, and it's a very you have to read it in chunks. You can't just, don't try and read it all at once, so your head will explode. You've just got to read it in chunks. Couple of things that struck me is that the party seems to want to promote Western individualism, particularly Saskatchewan and Alberta. There's a whole section on that. And I'm wondering how you understand that as someone who is in Ontario, and if elected, would be representing the people of the province of Ontario.
Well, first of all, Grant is from the West, so there is perspective there. But I think what we need to recognize, and this is what no one's talking about, and it's certainly not about the United Party of Canada per se, but about Albertans in general, and the reality that Alberta is on the brink of separating from Canada. Nobody's talking about that. There is a very strong movement. Grant is not, let me tell you, Grant is not about separating from Canada. Let me put that out there first and foremost. He's not about, the United Party isn't about becoming a 51st state. It is about presenting Canadian sovereignty, real sovereignty, and withdrawing from a globalist agenda that would take the sovereignty out of the hands of Canadians, because that's what's been happening. You know, Canada has lost its way. There's got to be a better way forward, and the United Party of Canada is willing and ready to do that. So the focus on the West comes very much out of the unfair, and I would say these are unfair tariffs, if you call it tariffs, but because the Albertan people have been made to transfer funds to Eastern Canada for how many decades? Like, it's been a long time, and they've had enough. There have been more money's come out of Alberta to the east of Canada over these years. It's over $1 trillion. That is incredible. No wonder. And what does Alberta and what does the West receive for that? Like, they only have 34 seats in the House. Compared, and Quebec has nearly double. And so I think there is this equalization that United Party wants to bring back to Canada, and I do agree with that. I think that is something that needs to be talked about.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, I mean, it answers the question. We could go down a long, long road about Canadian history.
Yes.
And having lived in parts of Canada that are what are called have-not provinces, I certainly see the benefits of equalization. I've seen the benefits of equalization to bring up people's life quality of life. But that's if the party wants to say that, that's certainly their right. And if you want to support that, that's certainly okay. One of the other things that I noticed was that there was a section on gun ownership, and they wanted the party platform is basically aside from canceling almost all of the existing gun laws, supports what's called the Castle Doctrine. And the Castle Doctrine, and it's something that comes out of the United States, allows a person to defend their property using firearms if necessary, or whatever means they have available to them.
Yes, not primarily perhaps firearms, but the option of doing that if necessary. And I would say that that's probably even a more Western problem than we have in the East. But I don't disagree with the ability to defend one's life, one's family, and one's property. And so I live in rural Ontario. We live on a 100-acre farm, and we do have guns. We use them because we have animals that come into our even into the barn. There's stuff that we have to deal with. The other thing is, for me, and this is relatively within the last few years, I've certainly had a lot of pushback and a lot of hate come at me, if we want to talk about that. And recently, a year ago, we actually bought 2 Rottweilers because we've had a truck stolen right out of our driveway, right beside our house. And so whether we would use the guns, if we were attacked in our house, yeah, I think we should have the ability to protect ourselves. We're not young. We can't fisticuff it out. And if someone comes in through our doors intent on harming us, then I think Canadians need to be able to protect themselves. And remember the gun laws that have been brought in to restrict and to take away our guns. I am totally opposed to that, for one thing, because they're targeting the wrong people. Like, if you want to take away guns, take away the guns that are held by people illegally. It's not legal gun owners that are the problem. Why do we have governments that want to punish Canadians who are not the culprits? How many farmers have killed people with their guns? It's not us. It's all of the illegal guns crossing the border. And that's what we need to target. And those are the people we need to target, not the legal ownership. So hope that helps a little.
Sure. The other thing that wasn't all that clear on the party platform, and maybe you can clarify this, is this is currently the sometimes called the the tariff election, because that's the major issue that has got all the headlines, and who's going to handle the tariffs the best. What's the party's position on that current situation?
Well, first of all, and this is personally, because I ran provincially, I was appalled at the pushback, but in such a fear-mongering way against President Trump. Now, I am not saying that his personality, everything else is whatever, but to have political leaders stirring up fear of the need to protect us from the Americans. These are our neighbors. These are our friends. We have family members in the US. What are we doing right now? So President Trump likes the art of the deal. What did our leaders not understand about that? And does he go all over? He gets people stirred up. That's part of his character and how he plays the game. But if we had adults at the table early on when President Trump was saying, I need you to clean up Canada, to clean up the fentanyl. And I have a son who's had drug addiction issues most of his life. And I'll tell you, he tells me this stuff and the drug situation in Canada is horrendous. It's horrendous. It needs to be dealt with. And these safe sites, I don't even want to go there. My son said, that is just so ludicrous. So back to this whole thing about Trump, though, I think that we could have done better. We could have had better negotiation with him right from the beginning. I think we could have cut this off at the pass with the tariffs, quite honestly, if we had been doing simply what he was asking, which he wasn't saying, he just didn't want his backyard polluted. I kind of get that. If my neighbor is throwing their junk in my backyard, I'm going to have a problem with that. So I'm not saying it's pro-Trump everything, but I think we need really, really good minds at the table. And I think we need good people negotiating. And look, now we have a 90-day reprieve with 10% tariffs with some exceptions. I think Trump is willing to negotiate. We need to get to the table and do a better job.
Well, what about his comments about the 51st state and referring to the prime minister as governor?
Well, he does like to incite a little bit of controversy, doesn't he? Trump incites controversy. What do I think? I think it was just to stir Canada into action. I can't imagine why he would want Canada, especially as it is, this mixed up and what I see a very broken Canada. But we're not going to become a 51st state. Canadians have a say in this, and we are a sovereign country, and President Trump knows that. So the issue is Canadian leadership and coming to the table and really coming to sharpen our pencils on what can we do and how can we do trade well? How can we get this so that it's moving and our stuff's moving across the border well? So I quite honestly, I'm not putting a lot of weight on that. I think he just wanted to stir us up.
You used an expression a moment ago about Canada being broken. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I think we've lost our way in Canada, especially over the last 3 or 4 decades. We've lost the bedrock values that formed Canada in the first place. We have lost the whole education. Now, I know education is not particularly a federal issue, but the federal government really has been dabbling in how we educate our children. Truth and justice do not prevail in Canada. I think justice is dependent on political view. I think it's dependent on political elites. And I think that and I know that many Canadians would agree with me, that there are special privileges given to politicians, and not, even if they're convicted of something. Our former prime minister, has he ever faced true justice for some of the things that we know that he was dabbling in? And so Canadians they become distrustful of political parties. And that's because...
Which former prime minister are you referring to?
Well, that's Prime Minister Trudeau. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I want to say that I think Canadians overall are really disillusioned with the political parties. And I, in particular, became very disillusioned with the Conservative Party that will not allow good candidates to run because they might have something that doesn't quite fit a progressive mindset. But we don't need more progressivism. We need to go back to the bedrock values that form this country and believe that we have a national identity. Prime Minister Trudeau said, we have no national identity. Well, come on, that's like telling me that I'm not part of my family. I have no right. And I think many Canadians resent that. And if we don't, we should, because we do have an identity. We've lost our way with understanding what that identity is.
How would you define more clearly or more concretely that identity?
More clearly, and what was the define it
concretely? More concretely.
Concretely. Okay. So here's what I believe. So number one, Canadian sovereignty, that we are a sovereign nation and founded on the principles of supremacy of God and the rule of law. That's in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's foundational, but it's not necessarily promoted or aligned with. I would also say that our identity in previous decades was what people from other countries sought after. They longed to come to Canada because we had a national identity, and it was based on fairness and love and kindness. It was based on the golden rule. It's simple. We don't need DEI. We need to go back to the golden rule and teach people how to be kind to each other again. We've lost all of that. And I think as Canadians, seeing what's going on, we have a generation, 2 generations who have become so disillusioned. Our young people, they need hope. They're in a place of hopelessness, partly because we've lost our way and our ideas and our thoughts of identity. Everyone is looking for identity, but we already have it. We already have it in Canada. We just need to go back to the roots that are already there and begin to actually put it in water the tree that's there, because then we'll see regrowth. And that's where it is. It's about putting Canadians first, restoring peace, order, and good government.
Mm-hmm. What do you think you said that you're receiving a very positive reaction. What are the key issues that you're hearing at the door?
Well,
just be aware we've got about 4 minutes.
Yes. Well, and so I've been doing some town halls and people coming and talking, and they're very excited because some of the things they resonate with is because I have a real focus on children and family. And our party does too. We really want to promote family. One of the things that our party is really looking at is how do we create and expand our economy by working in and through the family and promoting financial support, giving financial support to families, and taxation cuts for more children. We have actually aborted, I'll just put this out there, 4.5 million children since 1969, and it is a little bit of a mathematical equation. Each of those children have had 2 children, which was typical then, and then their children had 2 children. We would actually have 31.5 million children more in Canada. And so our population has been decimated by unlimited abortion, even to the point of having an abortion when the baby's in the birth canal. And if there is something so morally wrong here, that's why we've lost our way. And this isn't about punishing young women. This is from giving them a place. There are hundreds and probably thousands of couples who would just die to have that baby. Well, that's the wrong metaphor, but they are longing for a child. And what are we doing? Things are out of control. And then we have this is actually a culture of death we're living in Canada. It's a culture of death because we're killing babes in the womb, and they're babes. I don't care if our government tries to declassify human beings, which it has done, saying that an infant in the womb is not a human being until they leave the birth canal. Give your head a shake. And as a mom, I have 6 children, 4 of my own. Let me tell you, those infants in the womb have a lot to say. And, we know from neural research, they feel, they hear, they feel fear. So aborting a babe in the womb is an atrocity in my mind. So our party is committed to young women, to helping them, to funding pregnancy centers, more funding, and to funding adoption as the compassionate option, to really helping those parents. And in the future, some of those parents end up adopting children who have addiction issues from the womb. Those parents need help, and we're committed to families. That's what one of the things I really like about the United Party. Committed.
And at that point, I've got to say thank you, because we're just about out of time.
Oh my goodness.
Ann Gillies, the candidate for the United Party of Canada. A pleasure to talk to you, and best wishes on your candidacy. And I guess we'll see what happens on April 28th. Thank you. And thank you, friends, for being a part of Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. We'll talk again.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
Hi, I'm Lynn from Third Eye View, and welcome to a brand new season that we're looking forward to. We have some return guests and some brand new guests. And in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your summer, stay safe.
Calling all journalism students, Omni Television is once again awarding scholarships to qualified students pursuing a career in third language journalism.
You could go from here to here. Get started. Apply for the Omni Scholarship now.
Omni is home to a variety of locally